Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome in to this video that I'm recording on Monday. Hard to believe that this is the last month of October, and boy, time flies when you're having fun, right? So, now if you've been with me on my channel for the last month and a half or so, then you'll know that I primarily stick to Crossroads League men's and women's basketball, which I'm still going to do those here coming up, and hard to believe league play is 3 weeks out, roughly. Yeah, actually 3 weeks, Wednesday of this week, so that's pretty crazy to think about. I'm still going to be doing those daily game recaps. I know I've talked about that. Still going to do things for the national tournament, talk about that. So, again, please stay tuned for that. I'm still going to be doing those things. Now, of course, if you've been with me over the last month, you'll know that I recorded volleyball videos from the Crossroads League on the women's side, talking about massive upsets. And now, while there weren't any massive upsets this past weekend, I did want to record this video and share with you some of the, well, an updated view, I should say, of the playoff race. And now the top 8 teams that are currently in the top 8 in terms of the standings have officially punched their ticket to the postseason in terms of the league tournament. Now, of course, the Crossroads League has 10 total teams, so 8 of those 10 make the league tournament, and the following teams have officially qualified to make the league tournament. The top 8, and I'm going to start on the top and go down to the bottom. The top 8 teams that have officially made the Crossroads League tournament include Indiana Wesleyan, Mount Vernon Nazarene, Huntington, Taylor, Grace, Marion, Bethel, and Spring Arbor. Those are the 8 teams that have officially made the Crossroads League tournament. Of course, Goshen and St. Francis have been eliminated from playoff contention. You have Goshen now at 2-13 in the conference, 7-21 overall, and then St. Francis 4-23 overall and 0-15 in league play. St. Francis has lost 21 straight games, so obviously not the season that they were expecting to have under head coach Scott Haddix and assistant coach Neil Putt. That is for sure. And then you look at, of course, Goshen, not the kind of season they wanted either, 7-21 overall, 2-13 in the conference. And then you have a 3-way tie right now for the number 6, 7, and 8 seed, and that being Marion, Bethel, and Spring Arbor, all at 7 and 8 in conference. Marion 15-9 overall, Bethel 15-13 overall, and Spring Arbor 20-8 overall. Now, for Spring Arbor, they started off, I believe it was 12-0, 13-0, something like that. Roughly around that 12-0 mark to start off the regular season, and then conference play started, and all 8 of their losses have been in conference play. And then you look at Taylor right now, 18-9 overall, 9-6 in the conference, 10-2 at home. And then you have Huntington, 22-6 overall, 10-5 in the conference, and Mount Vernon Nazarene, 11-4 in conference play, 20-7 overall. And then, of course, the Wildcats of Indiana Wesleyan, 14-1 in conference play, 21-4 overall. They are 11-1 at home now this year, so pretty amazing statistics there. And, of course, the Wildcats' only conference loss so far this year came against Mount Vernon Nazarene here in Mount Vernon, Ohio, last Wednesday night, and that ended a 55-game winning streak against Crossroads League opponents for both the regular season and postseason Crossroads League tournament play. So, obviously, that was quite a big shock nearly a week ago now. And the Wildcats, though, started a brand new streak, beating Huntington on Saturday 3-0. And it was close for 2 out of the 3 sets, but the Wildcats were able to win that one. Of course, Shea Williams did return for the Wildcats on Saturday, even though she had limited minutes. But still, great to see her back. And, of course, it was senior day for the Wildcats Saturday, so they honored all of their seniors, and including Abigail Porter, the NAIA National Setter of the Year. She was in uniform, though, on Saturday. So hopefully she's able to come back here very, very soon. So those are an updated view of the standings. Now, I did want to talk about some of the tiebreaker scenarios, and I wrote that down on an extra sheet of paper, and I actually wrote it this morning for the purpose of recording this video. So now, again, please know that of course this will change because some of these teams have not played their opponent twice in the regular season. A lot of them have, some of them have not. Now, in terms of the tiebreakers, now the way the tiebreaker scenario works is that if a team split in the regular season, then the first tiebreaker is total amount of sets won. Now, the total amount of sets won, that goes over the course of both meetings in the regular season, and if that doesn't break the tiebreaker, then it goes down to total points scored against the opponent in each set during the second meeting only. And that was something I learned after Saturday when Indiana Wesleyan beat Huntington, which I kind of thought, when I first read about that, I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. But that is, and of course, once I mention this, then of course, hopefully you'll be able to understand that just a little bit better. So in terms of number one, and of course I'm starting at the top based on the current league standings. Number one, Indiana Wesleyan versus number two, Mount Vernon Nazarene. This is just in order of the current conference standings, by the way. So now Mount Vernon, though, does hold the tiebreaker over the Wildcats. Of course, the Wildcats swept them the first time. Mount Vernon swept them last week, so that tiebreaker would go 3-3. However, Mount Vernon, though, does get that tiebreaker based on the total set points during that meeting last week here in Mount Vernon, 75-62. So the Mount Vernon, though, does hold that tiebreaker over the Wildcats, meaning that if Indiana Wesleyan loses out and MVNU wins out, MVNU would get that number one seed in the Crossroads League tournament. Now, do I think that that's a long shot for Mount Vernon? Yes, because now out of the last three games for Mount Vernon, they host Grace Wednesday night, they go to Spring Arbor Saturday, and they go to St. Francis next Wednesday night. For the Wildcats, on the other hand, they have a little bit of a tougher schedule. They are at Marion Wednesday night, they are at Taylor on Saturday, and then they host Goshen next Wednesday night. Now, of course, if you wanted to get kind of technical, a little bit technical, then I guess you could say, well, Indiana Wesleyan definitely should beat Huntington or should beat Goshen next Wednesday night, which I definitely think so. So based on that, I think the Wildcats definitely are going to at least get one more win, and that, of course, I think definitely will be Goshen next Wednesday night. I'm not sure about Marion Wednesday night, not sure about Taylor on Saturday. Both those teams, Marion's been inconsistent this year, so you don't know which Marion team is going to show up each and every game. And for Taylor, they just beat Marion at Marion on this past Saturday. So obviously we don't know. You obviously don't know which Taylor team is going to show up. That is for sure. So, but now for the Wildcats, they either need one more win, which definitely should be against Goshen next Wednesday, or they would need one Mount Vernon loss. And based on Mount Vernon's remaining schedule, I could see them definitely winning out. Now, the only team I think that, maybe Grace and Spring Arbor could give them a little bit of a run, because Grace has been sneaky this year. They've had some huge upset wins already. They upset Taylor, they upset Marion. So obviously, that there is that possibility, of Grace upsetting Mount Vernon Wednesday night. And then, of course, Spring Arbor's played Mount Vernon really tough in Michigan the past couple of meetings. So again, that could go either way on Saturday. And then, of course, Mount Vernon's at St. Francis next Wednesday night. So on paper, Mount Vernon should easily sweep them. But in the past, St. Francis has given them a little bit of a run in Fort Wayne. So again, obviously, no game is a guarantee. The league is super competitive this year, that is for sure. And then you look at a little bit further down. You look at Huntington versus Taylor. Huntington, though, holding that tiebreaker. Huntington's third, Taylor's fourth right now on the standings. Huntington holding that tiebreaker over the Trojans 4-3. So Huntington, though, holding that, would get that tiebreaker. Since those two teams split on the season, Grace and Marion currently 5th and 6th. They meet again the last game of the regular season, so that could obviously be really interesting. And Grace, of course, stunning Marion the first meeting in Winona Lake, 3-0. Then you have 6 seed Marion, 7 seed Bethel. Bethel, of course, they're the 7 right now. Marion holding that tiebreaker over the Lady Pilots because the Knights swept the Pilots both times in the regular season. So Marion holding that head-to-head tiebreaker. Bethel and Spring Arbor, the 7 and 8 seed right now in the conference, they meet again on Wednesday night. And the first meeting in the regular season went to Bethel in 4 sets. So obviously that's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. And then some. So that is an updated view of everybody currently seeded 1 through 8. Obviously that's going to change because there's still 3 games left in the regular season. Now some other key notes going along with that. MVNU, now just for MVNU, I'm just talking about MVNU just for a second. Mount Vernon, they hold the tiebreakers over the following teams. They hold the head-to-head over Huntington, and Mount Vernon holds it over Taylor 5-3 in terms of sets won. Now, obviously, in terms of just the total set points, that tiebreaker would go to Taylor 113-107. The total amount of points in the second meeting only. However, Mount Vernon, though, getting that tiebreaker over the Trojans because of the sets won, for combining both games in the regular season, Mount Vernon gets that tiebreaker 5-3. And then, of course, now something that's really interesting is that because of Taylor's win over Marion this past Saturday and because of Mount Vernon's win over Goshen this past Saturday, Marion cannot catch Mount Vernon, which is obviously good news for the Lady Cougars because when the Lady Knights upset Mount Vernon, back when they upset Mount Vernon a week and a half ago, that game, both games went to 5 sets. So in terms of the sets won, that was tied 5-5. Marion, though, does hold the tiebreaker over Mount Vernon in terms of total set points for just the second meeting in Mount Vernon, 108-105. But the good news for Mount Vernon is Marion cannot catch them because Mount Vernon's at 11 wins, Marion is only at 7, and there's only 3 conference games left. So even if Mount Vernon were to lose out, Marion were to win out, Marion would be behind Mount Vernon by 1 game. So that's the good news for Mount Vernon. Marion cannot catch them. And then, of course, MVNU over Bethel. Mount Vernon, though, does get that tiebreaker 4-3 in terms of total sets won. And now, if the sets won hadn't broken the tiebreaker, Mount Vernon still holds the tiebreaker over Bethel 75-52 for total set points won in the second matchup only. But again, Bethel cannot catch Mount Vernon because Bethel is also sitting at 7 wins. Mount Vernon is up to 11, and there's only 3 games left in the conference. And then you look at Mount Vernon versus Spring Arbor. Their second meeting is going to be on Saturday, but of course Spring Arbor's another team cannot catch Mount Vernon. But after Saturday, I'll still write down who would get that tiebreaker just for conversational purposes only, because obviously Spring Arbor cannot catch them. And then you look at some other teams in terms of tiebreakers, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit where it gets more interesting. Huntington versus Grace, they meet again on this coming Saturday, November 1st. Huntington, though, beating them the first go-around, and I believe that was in 3 sets. And let me go back down to my iPad and just double-check that very, very quickly before we continue on. And the first time they beat Grace, or they played Grace, so Huntington swept Grace. Yeah, Huntington swept Grace 3-0. So obviously that could be really, really important because right now Grace is 2 games behind Huntington with 3 to play. So again, that game Saturday could be important. Now for Huntington, if they win one more game, let's say, which I think they definitely will on Wednesday night because they host Goshen. Now if Huntington wins that game, and if Mount Vernon beats Grace at Mount Vernon Wednesday night, then that means that Huntington would definitely secure no worse than the 4 seed in the Crossroads League tournament, because then they would be 2 games ahead of Grace with 2 games to... Actually, they'd be 3 games ahead of Grace with 3 to play should Grace lose to Mount Vernon and Huntington beat Goshen. Then obviously Grace would not be able to catch Huntington. So Huntington with a win Wednesday and a Grace loss, Huntington would officially secure no worse than that number 4 seed, because obviously nobody else could catch Huntington at that point, since Huntington would be at 11 wins. Now, looking at Huntington versus Marion, this doesn't really matter because Marion cannot catch Huntington. Marion's 3 games behind with 3 to play. Huntington sweeping them for the first time in 10 years. So Huntington, though, holding that head-to-head tiebreaker over the Lady Knights. And then Huntington versus Bethel. This is another game another team where it doesn't matter because Bethel cannot catch Huntington. Bethel's 3 back with 3 to play. Huntington swept Bethel both times this year. Huntington holding that head-to-head tiebreaker over Bethel. Huntington versus Spring Arbor. They play their second meeting, the last game of the regular season, on November 5th, which is next Wednesday night, last game of the regular season, but that game doesn't matter because, again, Spring Arbor cannot catch Huntington. Spring Arbor's at 7 wins. Huntington's already at 10, so one more Huntington win, Bethel or Spring Arbor could not catch them in that regard. Now, lastly, this is where it gets kind of crazy. You have Taylor versus Grace. Now, but these two teams split on the regular season. Grace would get that tiebreaker in terms of sets won 4-3, but if it came down to it, Grace would also get the points tiebreaker just in the second meeting only, 78-62. Grace is only one game behind Taylor for that number 4 spot, so that means if Grace loses to Mount Vernon on Wednesday, actually, if Grace loses 2 out of 3 and Taylor wins at least 1, then Taylor would lock no worse than a number 4 seed, because even if Taylor won Wednesday night and Grace lost on Wednesday night to Mount Vernon, Taylor would be 2 games up with 2 to play, and Grace then would still hold that tiebreaker, meaning that in that scenario, that if Taylor lost out and Grace won out, then Grace would get up to that number 4 spot. So obviously there is a lot on the line this coming week after each individual game. And of course I plan on posting another update on the standings probably after the Saturday game, so more than likely next Monday, because then at that point there would only be 1 game left before the end of the regular season. So obviously we would know a lot more after this coming Saturday once the next 2 games get played. So again, that's what's at stake between Taylor and Grace, trying to get up to that number 4 spot. Now for Grace, they have Mount Vernon, they have Huntington, and then Marion remaining on their schedule. And then for Taylor, they have St. Francis, Indiana Wesleyan, and Bethel left on their schedule. So obviously there is a lot on the line there. And then of course for Taylor and Marion, they are 2 games ahead of Marion, and that's actually interesting because those 2 teams split on the regular season, but Taylor, though, would get that tiebreaker 4-3. Taylor lost the first meeting, rather. They lost 3-1. They swept Marion 3-0, so Taylor, though, would get that tiebreaker over Marion 4-3, meaning that for Taylor, they would lock no worse than the 5 seed with either 1 more win or 1 more Marion loss. So obviously there is a lot on the line, that is for sure, this weekend. And then lastly, Grace versus Bethel. And this is the most crazy potential scenario that I think I've ever seen in the years that I've followed the Crossroads League. That Grace versus Bethel, they split on the regular season, so they end up tying 4-4 for sets won. That would not break the tiebreaker. Now get this. The total points between those 2 teams, just in the second meeting alone, because that's the next tiebreaker, they are tied 91-91. So meaning that if Grace and Bethel finish tied, it officially would be a coin flip tiebreaker administered by the volleyball sports chairperson that would flip a coin for that tiebreaker if Grace and Bethel remain tied. So potentially you could have, if Grace and Bethel only win 1 more game out of the last 3, which conceivably is doable, you could have a coin flip if Grace or Bethel being a 6 or a 7, or maybe a 7 and an 8 seed. So obviously that is huge, because with that tiebreaker scenario coming into play, if both those 2 teams finish tied, conceivably you could, considerably speaking, you could easily have, a coin. Well, you would have a coin flip if those 2 teams finish tied, to determine if those 2 teams would either go to Indiana Wesleyan, Huntington, or Mount Vernon in the first round. So, man, that's just crazy that potentially IWU, Mount Vernon, and Huntington would know who their first round opponent is via a coin flip, whether it be heads or tails. It's just crazy how that scenario is coming into play. So obviously there is a lot on the line these next 2 games. And again, I plan on recording a video next Monday. Once we get down to the nitty-gritty next Monday, at least that's when I plan on recording another video next Monday talking more about this if there are any teams that have clinched playoff spots at that point. So I plan on recording another video then to give you an update on the volleyball playoff race. If teams have clinched any playoff spots by that time, I will definitely share that with you next Monday. And then, of course, after next Thursday, I will record another video giving you a complete overview of the upcoming league tournament, which teams are officially in what seeding number, the upcoming matchups for the league tournament. All that stuff is going to be coming your way next Monday and Thursday, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And please subscribe to my channel. And again, for those of you that have subscribed to my channel, I really, really appreciate that. And again, please keep subscribing. Please keep sharing these videos with your friends and your family. And again, my goal is to hit 500 subscribers by February 21st, which is the end of the regular season for Crossroads League men's and women's basketball. So make sure that you subscribe to my channel so you are first notified whenever I upload new episodes. And again, I'm super, super pumped about the volleyball tournament coming up. And I plan on, again, like I mentioned, recording these updated videos next Monday and Thursday, talking about the updated playoff races. And then once the playoff field officially gets set with all the teams and whatever seeding positions they're in, giving you an update on that. And then, of course, basketball season's coming up here in just about 3 weeks, actually. So daily game recaps for both men's and women's basketball will be coming your way at that time. And then, of course, come March, we'll have a national tournament. I'll have videos coming your way talking about teams that I think will be in the national tournament based on the RPI and the ARC rankings. Just on the women's side, talking about that. And then, of course, after each individual round of a national tournament, giving you a daily game recap of the Crossroads League schools only. However far they go in the national tournament for both the men and the women, I'll definitely give you daily game recaps on that. And then, of course, also give you an updated view of my national tournament bracket after each individual round based on my picks, which I'll record a video once I fill out my national tournament bracket, sharing that with you. And then, of course, updating you on my bracket after each individual round of a national tournament come March. So, again, make sure that you stay tuned for all of that. And lastly, my Spotify for Creators podcast website. I still plan on doing that every come the end of March once the season officially ends, giving you an overview of the leaders in terms of points per game, that kind of stuff. That's going to be coming your way at the very end of March and as we head into 2026. So again, make sure that you stay tuned for that. You can follow me on that platform. Go to Matt Sports Talk on Spotify for Creators. There's an orange picture of a basketball there. Click on that. That is me. Follow me there so you're first notified whenever I upload those new episodes. So thanks so much again for tuning into this video. And if you did enjoy this video or if it was super helpful to you, please either like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly. Have a blessed rest of your week, and God bless.